My name is Emily Reynolds. I'm 29 years old, and I've lived in Austin, Texas my whole life. By day, I'm a school counselor, high school, to be exact. I spend most of my time listening to teenagers talk about their parents, their future, their fears. And I love it. I really do. It makes me feel useful. Like I'm helping in some small but solid way. Outside of work, things have been good lately. Better than good. I recently got engaged to Mark, a police officer here in Austin. He proposed in Fredericksburg during a long weekend we took to celebrate our 3rd anniversary. Just the two of us, a little cottage, wine tastings, and then, boom, he pulled out a ring after dinner on our last night there. No big spectacle, just honest emotion. It was perfect. So yeah, life was smooth. Safe. That kind of rhythm you don't realize you've fallen into until something slams into it hard enough to crack it wide open. It started with a phone call. It was a Thursday morning, around 7:30, maybe closer to 8 o'clock. I was about to leave for work, coffee in hand, keys already in my purse. My phone rang from an unknown number, and for whatever reason, I answered. I almost didn't. Sometimes I let those go to voicemail, but not that day. Hello, is this Emily Reynolds? A woman asked. Her voice was professional, practiced. Yes, I said. This is Monica from Greenline Credit Services. We're reaching out about your outstanding balance of $78,000 on your Platinum Elite account. My first reaction? Scam. One of those fraud calls. I almost hung up. I think you have the wrong person, I said. I don't have any credit card with Greenline. Monica was unfazed. We have an account under your name, your current address, and your social security number. It's been active for 6 months. Would you like us to send a detailed statement to your email? Now that stopped me. I asked her what address and email they had on file. And she read them off, my apartment address here in Austin, and my real email. Not even the one I use for online shopping, but the main one. The one I reserve for bills and work and family. My stomach dropped. I asked her to go ahead and send the documents. The call ended. I stood there in my kitchen, still holding my coffee, suddenly aware of how still everything was around me. The fridge buzzed faintly. A bird chirped somewhere outside. I felt disconnected from it all. Then the email came. I opened the attachment and felt my chest tighten. It was all there. My name, Emily Marie Reynolds. My address. My social security number. A card opened in my name, with transaction records going back half a year. Restaurants I'd never been to. Department stores I'd never stepped inside. A few hotel bookings. Some electronics. And then, one giant charge. $72,000. Capital City Auto Sales. A car. A luxury SUV, to be exact. One single payment. No financing, no lease. Just bought, outright. I scrolled further, looking at the application. Someone had signed my name. Or tried to. It wasn't a perfect match, but close enough that I could see how it passed. I felt lightheaded. Mark walked into the kitchen just then, already in uniform. He was adjusting his wristwatch when he noticed me frozen in place. Everything okay? He asked. I just shook my head. I don't know. I think someone's pretending to be me. He crossed the room and looked over my shoulder at the laptop screen. I could feel the change in his posture the second he read the first line of the statement. They used your full information, he said quietly. Everything, I replied. Even my email. And that car dealership, that's local. Yeah. I met his eyes. It's here in Austin. He took a step back and pulled out his phone. His face was calm, but I could tell his brain was already shifting into cop mode. I, meanwhile, just stood there trying to make sense of it. Someone had stolen my identity. Someone knew enough about me to pull this off. This wasn't a random stranger halfway across the world. It felt personal. Close. Too close. I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake. A glitch. Maybe the bank got hacked, or someone else named Emily Reynolds was the real account holder, and I was just tangled in the confusion. It happens, right? People get mixed up all the time. But that hope didn't last long. The email from Greenline wasn't just a transaction log. It included PDFs of signed applications, ID verification, account approvals, all tied to me. My legal name, my address, my date of birth. Even the last 4 digits of my social security number were correct. I stared at the scanned image of a driver's license, grainy but legible. It was mine. Same photo, same number, same everything. At least, that's what it looked like on first glance. I tried to breathe normally. I clicked on the next file. It was a copy of the vehicle purchase agreement from Capital City Auto Sales. The SUV, a luxury model I couldn't even afford if I drained every savings account I had, was bought in full using the Platinum Elite card. The signature was again close, but not perfect. Mine has a slant. This one was too flat, too rigid. I would have spotted the difference if I were reviewing it myself, but to a clerk behind a desk? Probably looked fine. I didn't wait. I called the dealership directly. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone. Not yet. So I lied. I said I was Emily Reynolds, the cardholder, and I needed to verify details about a recent purchase I'd made. I gave them the last 4 digits of the card. Greenline had included that in the file, and they pulled it up. Yes, we have that record, the man on the other end confirmed. Purchased 6 weeks ago. Full payment, no financing. And what ID was used at the time? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Texas driver's license, he replied. Photo ID with signature verification. Everything matched. Standard procedure. I took a slow breath. And do you have a copy of it? We keep digital. Scans on file, yes. Can I ask what address was listed on the application? I asked. I've recently moved and want to make sure everything aligns. The man hesitated. Let me check. A pause. Then he read it off. Not my current address. Not even my old one. It was my brother Dylan's. And the phone number listed? Also his. I felt the floor shift beneath me. I mumbled something about following up later and ended the call as politely as I could manage. Dylan. My older brother. I sat there for a moment, just staring at my screen, then at nothing. Dylan had been struggling for a while. Job to job. In and out of apartments. Sometimes in between relationships, sometimes overlapping them. He was charming, reckless, and good at talking himself into and out of situations. But this? No. He wouldn't do something like this to me. Would he? I thought back to last year, when he'd stayed at my place for a few weeks during one of his rough patches. I let him crash on my couch while he got things together. He was grateful, polite. Cleaned up after himself. Even helped fix a cabinet in my kitchen. We didn't always get along, but we had history. Blood. Trust. At least I thought we did. During that time, there had been a day when my purse went missing. Just for a few hours. I tore through the apartment looking for it, only to find it behind the couch later that evening. I figured it had slipped down while I was rushing around. I didn't even mention it to him. Now, I wasn't so sure. Mark came home that evening to find me sitting on the floor with folders, papers, and notes spread all around me. I hadn't gone to work. I couldn't. My mind was spinning too fast, and I needed answers before I could face a classroom full of kids pretending to be okay. I told him what I found. The call to the dealership. The address. The phone number. He didn't say much at first. Just listened. Then he took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. We're going to do this the right way, he said. No assumptions. No family drama yet. We file a report. We let the investigation speak for itself. I nodded slowly. But deep down, I already knew. Whoever was behind this knew me well. Well enough to forge my name, copy my license, and buy a car pretending to be me. And if it was Dylan, I wasn't ready to face what that meant. I waited a full day before doing anything else. My head was spinning too fast, and I needed the dust to settle before I made another move. I went through every possible explanation, every version of reality that didn't involve my own brother stealing from me. Maybe someone else used his address. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe Dylan had nothing to do with it. But I couldn't shake the facts. That SUV was real. That dealership verified the purchase. And the address they had on file, the one tied to the card used to buy the car, was undeniably his. Still, I needed more. So I called Capital City Auto Sales again. This time, I pushed a little harder. I asked to speak directly with someone from the sales team. I told them I was doing a routine check on all credit-related purchases under my name for insurance purposes. It was a stretch, but I delivered it with just enough confidence to pass. The salesman on the line was polite, if a little impatient. Yes, we remember the transaction, he said. Unusual, but everything was in order. ID, payment, documentation. I pressed him. Do you happen to remember what the ID looked like? The person who came in, was it clear they were me? There was a short silence. Honestly, I'm not sure what you mean. You were here in person. No, I said, my voice tightening. I wasn't. That's why I'm asking. Another pause. Then he pulled up the file. Well, the photo matched the license. That's all we're supposed to confirm. Do you have a phone number on file for the account? He hesitated again. Yes. Can you tell me what it is? He recited the number slowly, and I wrote it down, even though I didn't need to. I already knew it by heart. It was Dylan's. That was the moment the denial finally cracked. This wasn't random. It wasn't a stranger, or some coincidence, or a one-in-a-million case of mistaken identity. It was him. And now I had to figure out what to do with that truth. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to see for myself. So that night, I drove by his place. I didn't call. I didn't warn him. I just got in my car and went. It was just after 9 o'clock in the evening. His street was quiet, dark except for a few porch lights and the flicker of a TV through a neighbor's window. I slowed as I turned the corner, pulling over just far enough to watch without being obvious. And there it was. Parked right outside, in the driveway I used to run up as a kid. A brand new SUV. Sleek, black, spotless. The same model and color from the dealership records. There was no mistaking it. He hadn't even bothered to hide it. I sat there in the driver's seat for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. I watched the glow from his living room window. I could see silhouettes moving around, him and his girlfriend, probably. Maybe laughing. Maybe watching a movie. Maybe talking about nothing at all. I thought about walking up to the door. Ringing the bell. Demanding answers. But I didn't. I just drove away. Back at my apartment, I sat on the couch staring at the blank TV screen. My thoughts were louder than anything Netflix could drown out. My brother, my own brother, had used my name, my credit, my entire identity to buy himself a car. And he was just living his life like nothing happened. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, piecing together everything I could remember. The times he asked me about my job, my finances, my email habits. The night my purse disappeared for a few hours. The fact that he had stayed at my place unsupervised when I wasn't even thinking about protecting my personal documents. It all pointed in one direction. And now, the question wasn't whether he did it. It was what I was going to do about it. I didn't call Dylan the next day. I told myself I needed to think, but the truth was simpler than that. I didn't trust myself to keep calm. I didn't trust my voice, or my words, or my anger. I was torn between rage and disbelief. And still, beneath all that, something heavier, heartbreak. So I took a different route. I called him casually that evening, as if nothing had changed. Just a big sister checking in. I kept my tone light, almost cheerful, which made the bitterness rise in my throat. "Hey, you good?" I asked when he picked up. "Yeah," he said quickly, like he'd been doing something he didn't want interrupted. "What's up?" "Just wanted to hear your voice," I said. "Been a minute." He laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, been kind of slammed lately. You know how it is. Still working at that HVAC place?" There was a slight pause. No. That ended a couple weeks ago. I'm actually starting something new soon." I nodded to myself. Classic Dylan, always between jobs, always just about to turn a corner. Always chasing the next thing before the last one even landed. "Good for you," I said. "You deserve something steady." He grunted in agreement, but it was distracted. Then he cut the conversation short with an excuse about needing to call someone back. His voice was tight. It wasn't just impatience, it was something else. Nervousness? Guilt? He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention the car. Didn't thank me for anything. Just hung up like he couldn't get off the line fast enough. That night, I did something I told myself I wouldn't do again. I drove back to his place. It wasn't spying. That's what I kept telling myself. I wasn't there to watch him, I was there to see that car again. To prove I hadn't imagined it. It was still there, gleaming under the streetlight like a trophy. A black luxury SUV. Sleek, expensive, brand new. My stomach twisted. I parked farther down the street this time and just sat there, hands folded in my lap. I watched the house like it might confess something if I stared long enough. Then the porch light flicked on. Dylan stepped outside, phone in hand, pacing barefoot across the driveway. He was talking to someone. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his gestures were animated. Frustrated. Maybe even angry. Then his girlfriend came out. Leah. She was wearing one of those oversized sweatshirts that probably belonged to him. She walked straight to the SUV, unlocked it with the key fob, and opened the back door. She grabbed something, a backpack, I think, then went back inside. Like it was her car. Like it was theirs. They were living off of me. Off my name. The next morning, I pulled every document I had. Lease agreements, credit card statements, bank files, social security paperwork. I needed to build a wall around my identity, and I needed it fast. But it still wasn't enough. So I told Mark. I showed him the credit files, the scanned ID from the dealership, the recorded transactions, the dealership call logs. And finally, I told him what I'd seen with my own eyes, the car, the license plate, Dylan walking around like nothing was wrong. Mark didn't react with shock. Not the way I expected. He just nodded slowly. "This isn't a family issue anymore," he said. "This is criminal. We do this right. By the book." He made a copy of everything. He opened a fraud report under my name. Official, logged, documented. And then, without saying it directly, he started pulling strings. Not favors, connections. He was careful not to link it back to me or him personally. No bias. No shortcuts. "I need you to stay quiet for now," he told me. "We build the case. Let the facts speak first." I agreed. But it felt like something inside me had cracked. Not anger, not even betrayal. Just a hollow space where my brother used to be. That Sunday, my parents invited us all for lunch. They wanted to see everyone, me, Mark, Dylan, Leah. Just a normal family get-together. The kind we used to have growing up. When things were simpler. When trust hadn't been turned into currency. Mark leaned in that morning and whispered, "We should go. See him. Observe. Nothing more." And I nodded. Because somewhere between that call and that car and that silence on Dylan's face, I had made a quiet decision. I wasn't letting this go. The moment we pulled into my parents' driveway that Sunday, I felt it, tightness in my chest, like something was waiting to go wrong. Mark reached over and gave my hand a quick squeeze. His presence grounded me, but it didn't make the tension disappear. I hadn't seen Dylan face to face since everything had started to unravel. And now, we were about to sit at the same table and pretend we were still just brother and sister, not suspect and victim. The SUV was already there, parked at the curb like it belonged. I couldn't stop looking at it. I knew every detail now, the model, the dealership, even the exact time it was purchased. And still, seeing it in person felt surreal. Like it didn't belong in our world, in our family. Inside, everything was deceptively normal. My mom was pulling a roast out of the oven. My dad was setting the table. Dylan and Leah were on the couch, laughing at something on his phone. He stood up when he saw us, casual as ever. "Hey, sis," he said. Like nothing had happened. I nodded and offered a strained smile. "Hey." He hugged me, and I let him. His arms around me felt unfamiliar, like I was being embraced by someone wearing my brother's skin. Lunch started like every other Sunday before. Small talk. Food passed around. My mom fussing over portion sizes, my dad making lame jokes. But underneath it all, there was a current. I watched Dylan. Watched how he talked, how he moved, how easily he slipped into this role. He bragged about the SUV like it was no big deal. Said he'd gotten a huge bonus from some contract work he did for a friend in real estate. Said he figured it was time to reward himself. Leah nodded along like it was all true. I wanted to scream. Instead, I played along. I smiled when my mother asked about wedding planning. I nodded when my dad asked Mark about his schedule. But my mind was somewhere else. Back to last year. Back to the day my purse disappeared for a few hours. It had been a Tuesday. I'd been home late from work, and Dylan was already on the couch, watching TV. I couldn't find my purse for hours, searched the kitchen, the bathroom, the car. It turned up behind the couch later that night. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Just a careless drop. But now, I saw it differently. He had everything he needed that day. My ID. My credit card. My social. All of it. I tried to remember if I had checked the contents afterward. I hadn't. Why would I? I was tired, he was family, and the purse was right where I'd found it. But now, thinking back, it felt like a setup. A rehearsal. The day he stole my identity began with a missing purse and a borrowed couch. Across the table, Mark was playing it cool. But I knew him too well. His shoulders were tighter than usual. His eyes flicked between Dylan and Leah like a chess player counting future moves. He had received a file the night before, dealer footage, transaction records, a scan of the ID used. All of it pointed to Dylan. But we hadn't looked at it yet. He wanted to wait until after the lunch, in case things got volatile. He excused himself near the end of the meal, saying he needed to grab something from the car. No one questioned it. I sat there, listening to Dylan talk about his plans for the summer. A road trip. Maybe out west. Maybe a cabin in Colorado. Leah was beaming. He talked like a man who didn't owe anyone anything. Like a man who'd built his life with his own hands. But I knew better. He hadn't earned it. He'd taken it from me. Mark returned quietly, folder in hand, face unreadable. He met my eyes once, then shook his head almost imperceptibly. I understood. Whatever he'd seen, it confirmed everything. And something in the room shifted, even if no one else felt it yet. The truth was no longer a theory. It was a fact waiting to explode. We didn't talk in the car on the way home. Not for the first few minutes. Mark drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road, his jaw tight. The folder he had retrieved from the trunk sat on my lap, unopened, but heavy with implication. I kept my hands on top of it, fingers splayed like I needed to hold it in place. Like it might fly away if I let go. When he finally spoke, it was low. Measured. "It's him." I didn't answer right away. "There's no question," he continued. The dealership security footage, they had 3 angles. The guy walks in wearing a hoodie, sunglasses, and a blonde wig. It sounds ridiculous, but when you slow it down, it's obvious. It's Dylan. He wore enough makeup to resemble your license photo, and they barely glanced at the ID. The guy at the front desk even joked that you looked different in person. My throat went dry. I looked down at the folder. "Want to see it?" Mark asked. No, I wasn't ready. "Not yet." He continued. The credit application was filed online. He used your email as the login, but changed the phone number and mailing address to his own during the verification steps. He got the confirmation code sent to a spoofed phone number tied to his current cell service. I pulled the logs. He set the whole thing up from your apartment's IP address 6 months ago. While he was staying with me. Yeah. It all made sense now. The missing purse. The questions he'd asked about my job and finances. The way he'd hovered near my desk sometimes, like he was just bored, but his eyes were always scanning. The password list I used to keep in a drawer, gone, then replaced. I never thought twice. Why would I? I was still processing it when Mark added, the bank already confirmed the addresses were altered within minutes of activation. It wouldn't have triggered suspicion, he made the changes from your verified account after logging in. It looked like a legitimate update. I finally looked up at him. How bad is this? He took a breath. It's a felony. Multiple charges. Identity theft. Wire fraud. Possibly even forgery, depending on how the bank wants to pursue it. And the car? Seized, most likely. If he's lucky, they'll let him settle for restitution and avoid jail. But it's not just the car. It's the way he built the lie. He faked being you, Emily. I leaned my head back against the seat. What do I do now? We file officially. You're already on record. I've kept it professional, no personal conflict noted. But from this point forward, I need to step back from the case. I can't be involved beyond what I've done. I nodded. I appreciated that. Mark was by the book, and I respected him more for it. That night, I sat on the couch with the folder unopened beside me. Mark was in the other room, giving me space. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just hollow. Like someone had scooped out part of me and replaced it with silence. The idea of reporting Dylan still felt impossible, but it was also inevitable. He'd stolen from me. Not money, not just data. He'd taken my name. My trust. My very identity. And he hadn't even flinched when we sat across from each other at lunch. He lied with ease. Smiled through it. That's when I realized something deeper. He hadn't done this out of desperation. He'd done it because he believed he could get away with it. The next morning, I went to the precinct. I gave a full formal statement. I handed over the folder. I signed the fraud report, listed every detail I could recall about Dylan's stay, the day the purse went missing, the credit activity, the forged signature. I submitted everything. The officer who took the report didn't flinch. She just nodded, typed, and asked follow-up questions with the same calm professionalism I used at work when a student told me something heavy. I suddenly understood what it felt like to sit on the other side of that conversation. To give voice to something that shouldn't exist, but does. When I walked out of the station, the sun was too bright. The world looked the same, but I wasn't the same inside. Mark met me outside. He didn't ask how it went. He just held the door open for me as I got into the car. We were past guessing now. The truth was set in motion. Dylan Reynolds was no longer just my brother. He was a suspect. The days that followed moved in strange, uneven rhythms. I kept going to work, kept smiling at students, kept giving advice I barely believed anymore. My voice still carried calm, but inside I was unraveling thread by thread. I had filed the report. I had passed the evidence. There was no turning back now. Still, I didn't tell my parents. I couldn't, not yet. I didn't know how to frame it. What words do you even use to tell someone their son committed a crime against their daughter? Mark and I decided to wait. Let the case breathe, he said. There's no need to throw a bomb into your family until the DA moves forward. It made sense. But it felt like living inside a lie. A quiet one, heavy and constant. Then came the Sunday lunch invitation. My mom texted me early in the week, "We're doing another family day. Everyone's coming, Dylan too. You and Mark better not bail." She added a smiling face at the end, like that would soften the weight of it. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "We'll be there." Mark didn't object when I told him. He nodded slowly, thoughtful. We should go. Might be the last time we see him as a free man. And it's a chance to see how he acts, knowing nothing yet. It was calculated, I knew. But also right. I wanted to see him again, not for closure, not for confrontation, but to confirm for myself the gap between the brother I once knew and the man he had become. We arrived a few minutes late that Sunday, deliberately. I didn't want to get there first. I didn't want to sit across from him waiting for the mask to slip. The SUV was there again. Parked like a monument to his audacity. Inside, the atmosphere felt almost cheerful. My parents were bustling around, setting out drinks and snacks. Dylan was in the backyard grilling, wearing sunglasses and laughing loud enough to let everyone know he was in a good mood. Leah stood beside him, arm looped around his waist, chatting easily with my mother. I walked out onto the patio, trying not to stare. But then I heard him. "Thing runs smooth as silk," Dylan was saying, flipping a burger. Fully loaded. I'm telling you, that bonus came at the perfect time. My mother beamed. "You deserve something nice. You've been working so hard lately." I swallowed hard and looked at Mark. He gave the smallest nod. The lie had become his truth. He wasn't just pretending, he was rewriting his entire story. He saw me a moment later, lifting the spatula like it was a wave. "Hey, Em. Glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. He grinned like nothing was wrong. Like we weren't sitting on opposite sides of a line that couldn't be uncrossed. We ate. Talked. Laughed, even. I went through the motions with mechanical precision, saying just enough, smiling just right. My parents were glowing, 2 children, 1 table, 1 future wedding. They had no idea the foundation beneath them was cracking. Mark stepped away halfway through lunch, claiming he left something in the car. I knew what he was doing. The DA's office had finalized the packet 2 days ago: security footage, ID scans, transaction logs, voice call recordings. Mark had printed everything and stored it in a single folder, locked in his glove box. While everyone else chatted, he sat in the front seat and reviewed the evidence again, one last time. His silence wasn't hesitation. It was preparation. He returned a few minutes later, holding the folder in one hand. I caught the way his fingers curled tighter around it. Dylan didn't notice. He was too busy telling a story about a trip he and Leah wanted to take, something about hiking through Utah, getting off the grid. Mark sat down next to me, his knee brushing mine. I felt the tension in his body like static, and I knew what was coming. I looked at Dylan, really looked at him. Same boy who used to race me on our bikes. Same teenager who snuck out the window and got grounded for a week. But also, not the same at all. Something had changed. Something in him had allowed this lie to root itself and grow. I had once trusted him more than anyone. Now I barely recognized the shape of his shadow. Everyone, Mark said suddenly, his voice quiet but firm. The table stilled. I have something I need to say. My mother blinked, mid-laugh. What's going on? He laid the folder gently on the table in front of him. I felt my stomach clench. Dylan's smile froze. And for the first time, I saw something real flicker behind his eyes. Panic. The air changed instantly. It was as if someone had drawn a curtain back and sunlight had turned into floodlight, bright, harsh, unforgiving. No one spoke. No one moved. My mom looked at Mark, then at me, her mouth parting like she wanted to speak but didn't know which words to pick. My dad's hand hovered in midair, holding a fork that never made it to his mouth. Dylan sat still, but his fingers tightened around his soda can. I could almost hear the metal crinkle under the pressure. Mark opened the folder calmly, deliberately, as though he were presenting documents at a board meeting. No drama. Just facts. He slid a printed photograph onto the table, then another, and another. Surveillance stills. High-resolution shots from the dealership's security cameras. There, frozen in time, was Dylan, wearing a hoodie, a blonde wig, sunglasses. Standing at the counter. Handing over an ID. Sitting in the office, signing paperwork. Frame after frame showed him impersonating me. You've all seen Emily's license, Mark said, his voice steady. This was the ID presented at Capital City Auto Sales. To purchase the SUV currently parked in front of this house. The dealership processed the payment using a high-limit credit card issued in Emily's name. He placed the scanned ID copy on the table next. My driver's license, or at least a version of it. Tampered with. Edited just enough to pass. Mark looked directly at Dylan. The phone number on the credit application was yours. The address, yours. The security questions answered using details only someone close to Emily would know. Dylan didn't move. My mom's voice finally cut through the silence. Fragile. Mark, what is this? Mark didn't answer her. He kept his eyes on Dylan. You committed identity theft, Dylan. Fraud. You stole your sister's information and used it to obtain a vehicle, plus additional charges totaling more than $78,000. Dylan let out a short, dry laugh, as if hoping he could turn the moment into a misunderstanding. Come on, man. What are you even talking about? Leah looked at him, confused, blinking rapidly. Wait, what? Mark ignored the protest. He pulled one final document from the folder and placed it in the center of the table. A signed statement from the dealership manager, confirming Dylan's physical presence and behavior during the sale. Emily filed an official fraud report, Mark said, calmly. The case is now in the hands of the district attorney. There is no question of if this happened. The only question now is how you want to face it. Dylan's expression twisted into disbelief. Are you serious? You're gonna sit there and do this? In front of Mom and Dad? You did it in front of them, I said, finally speaking. My voice was quiet, but firm. You lied in front of them. In front of me. He turned to me then, mouth opening like he was about to explain everything away, the way he always did. But I beat him to it. I trusted you. I let you into my home. I believed you were trying to get your life back together. His face hardened. I was. Mark stood slowly, reached behind his back, and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The sound of them clicking open was louder than anything I'd ever heard. Dylan Reynolds, he said, his voice now the firm tone of a police officer, you are under arrest for identity theft and fraud. You have the right to remain silent, my mother gasped. My father stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. Leah put both hands over her mouth, eyes wide. Dylan shot up from his seat. Wait, no, wait. You can't do this here. This is insane. You did this here, Mark replied. You brought it to this table. I stood slowly, barely breathing, watching Mark step behind my brother and secure the cuffs around his wrists. Emily, Dylan said, his voice cracking. I didn't mean to, I swear, I was gonna fix it. I stared at him, my voice hollow. You weren't even going to tell me. My mom was crying now. My dad looked at Mark like he didn't recognize him. He's your family, he said. Mark didn't flinch. So is she. Dylan stood there, cuffed, surrounded by disbelief. And for the first time, I saw the fear in his eyes, not of being caught, but of being seen. Not as a victim of bad luck, or a guy down on his fortune. But for what he really was. And I knew then, whatever happened next, there was no undoing this. We had crossed a line we couldn't come back from. They didn't take him away in the police cruiser that day. Mark had called ahead, followed the protocol for handling family-related arrests delicately, which meant an off-duty officer met us a few streets down to process Dylan quietly. But the damage was already done. The sound of the cuffs, the shift in everyone's faces, the silence left in the room after Mark read him his rights, it all carved into the fabric of our family like a blade. My mom tried to stop it. She moved toward Mark, pleading, hands out like she could physically shield her son from consequence. There has to be another way. This is your brother-in-law. He's a suspect, Mark said, without malice but with finality. And she's the victim. My father didn't speak at all. He just stood behind my mother, his hand on her shoulder, staring at Dylan like he couldn't process what he was seeing. Like if he blinked hard enough, the version of his son standing in handcuffs would turn back into the boy with scraped knees and a bicycle. Dylan didn't fight. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just looked at me as if hoping my face would change. Hoping I'd break, back down, make it stop. But I didn't. Mark led him to the door, and for a second, no one moved. Then Leah broke. She burst into tears, hands trembling, voice high and shaky. You told me it was your card. You told me it was legit, Dylan. You made me ride in that car. He flinched, like the words stunned more than the handcuffs. I didn't think it would go this far, he muttered. I looked at him one last time before the door closed behind him. You didn't think about me at all, I said. The door clicked shut. And then he was gone. What followed was a blur, my mother sobbing into a dish towel, my father finally speaking, asking, why didn't you come to us, over and over? Leah sat alone on the patio steps, crying into her hands. I answered every question I could, though it didn't make any of it easier. He used my name. My credit. My license, I said. He altered bank records. He forged a signature. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. But you didn't tell us, my mom started. Because I knew you'd try to protect him, I replied. And this time, he didn't just lie to you. He stole from me. Mark returned after processing Dylan with the arresting officer. His badge was tucked away. He sat next to me, wordless, and held my hand. I stayed long enough to see my mother calm down, my father finally sit again. But I couldn't stay longer. Everything in that house felt contaminated, every photo on the wall, every memory in the air. It was still our family's home, but something inside it had fractured. That night, back at our apartment, I opened the folder for the first time. I looked at every photo. Every signature. Every lie. There was no mystery left. Just betrayal in ink and pixels. Mark sat beside me, silent. When I finished, I closed the folder slowly and stared at the ceiling. Do you think he ever planned to stop? No, Mark said. I think he planned to ride it as long as no one looked too closely. And he would have. If I hadn't picked up that phone. If I hadn't pressed. If I hadn't trusted the part of me that knew something was wrong. He would still be driving that car. Still spending under my name. Still living as someone he wasn't. I went to bed that night not feeling angry, not even sad. I felt relieved. Because the truth had finally come out. And I was still standing. The police station was colder than I expected. Not just physically, though the air conditioning hummed with an unforgiving chill, but emotionally. Every surface was hard, every seat uncomfortable, every clock ticking louder than it should. Mark walked with me to the entrance, but that was as far as he could go. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and said, "You've got this." I stepped inside alone. Giving a formal statement isn't like telling a story. It's precise. Every word matters. Every detail has to be clear, verifiable, timed. The detective assigned to my case was kind but methodical. She walked me through each section like a surgeon with a scalpel, slow, deliberate, exact. I confirmed the dates. When Dylan stayed at my apartment. When my purse went missing. When I first noticed suspicious charges. I detailed every conversation, every call to the bank, the dealership, the moment I saw the SUV outside his house. I described how I called him under the pretense of catching up, how I observed his behavior at the family lunch, how Mark stepped away to retrieve the evidence. She asked me about my relationship with Dylan. I told her the truth, how we had once been close. How I looked up to him when we were kids. How I let him sleep on my couch because I believed in second chances. And how I never imagined he would betray me like this. By the time we finished, 2 hours had passed. The detective reviewed my statement and asked if I wanted to add anything. I paused, then said, yes. I told her I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to see him suffer. But I wanted the truth to matter. I wanted my name back. I wanted to walk through life again without wondering if someone else was living it in my place. She nodded and made a note. Then she closed the file. As I stepped out into the sunlight, everything felt too bright. The world had kept spinning, and I had spent the last 2 hours reliving every moment of the lie that had tried to consume me. Back at home, I received a call from the bank. They had reviewed the report and suspended all collections on the Platinum Elite account pending the outcome of the investigation. The woman on the line was courteous, even apologetic. She said I'd receive an official notice within 48 hours confirming the freeze. It was a small step, but it felt enormous. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long moment, absorbing the weight of what I had done. I had stood up. Spoken out. And now, slowly, the gears were turning in my favor. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same Emily who had answered that first phone call, coffee in hand, half listening. I wasn't the same sister who trusted unconditionally. I had seen what it looked like when love and loyalty got twisted into tools. When someone close could carve into your life with precision and wear your identity like a costume. My parents didn't call that day. I understood. They were grieving in their own way. I didn't blame them. But I also didn't reach out. I needed space. That night, Mark and I sat on the balcony in silence. He didn't try to fix anything. He just sat with me. I don't know how to move forward with them, I said finally. You don't have to know yet, he said. You just have to move. We sat there until the sky darkened, the city humming below us. I thought about the students I counseled every day. The things they told me in confidence. The secrets they carried. And I realized something, I had become one of them. A person trying to rebuild after trust was broken. And somehow, in that realization, I felt less alone. Because now I knew what it meant to lose faith, and what it took to reclaim it. Dylan's arraignment came quickly. Less than a week after his arrest, he stood before a judge and heard the charges read aloud: identity theft, fraud, unauthorized use of a financial instrument, and forgery. I wasn't there in person, but I followed the updates through the court's public record system, each file like a page in a story I never asked to be written. He pled not guilty. Of course he did. That weekend, my parents called. First my mother. Her voice trembled from the moment I answered. We didn't know, Em. I swear to you, we didn't know. I know, I said, and I meant it. But it happened anyway. There was a pause. Then she asked the question she'd been avoiding. Can you withdraw the complaint? I closed my eyes. No, but he's your brother. No, I repeated. He stopped being that the moment he chose to steal from me. She cried. I stayed silent. Then came my father's turn. His voice was rough, tired. This is tearing your mother apart. He tore it apart, I said. I'm just trying to survive what's left. He didn't argue. Didn't plead. Just whispered, I'm sorry, and hung up. I cried after that. Not for Dylan. Not even for the money. For the loss of something deeper, whatever thread had once connected us all. A family isn't just shared history. It's shared faith. And ours had snapped. Mark stayed close through all of it. He never once told me what I should feel. He just held space for the pain. Some nights, I sat beside him on the couch and said nothing for hours, and he never tried to fill the silence. He just held my hand. One night, as we lay in bed, he asked softly, Do you regret filing the report? No, I said. But I regret needing to. Dylan was out on bail, staying at a friend's place according to the case file. He hadn't contacted me. No apology. No explanation. And I didn't expect one. People like him, when they cross a line that deep, they don't usually turn back. But I still had questions. So I requested the full interview transcript from the station, the one they conducted after his arrest, right before they processed him. He said he did it out of desperation. Said he didn't mean to let it go that far. Said he planned to pay me back once he got his life together. Said it was only temporary. Said he thought I wouldn't notice. Those words stuck with me the longest. He thought I wouldn't notice. Not that I'd forgive. Not that I'd help. He thought I would be too blind to see what he'd taken. That I would trust him enough to stay quiet. That I would just accept it. That assumption cut deeper than the crime. It told me everything I needed to know about how he saw me. Weak. Passive. Naive. I decided then that I wasn't going to let his story define mine. I wouldn't let his fraud become my silence. If the system took its time, so be it. If the debt lingered for months, fine. I would wait. But I would not disappear beneath it. My lawyer assured me the evidence was airtight. The dealership was cooperating. The bank had paused collections and flagged the account as fraud. I wouldn't be held financially liable, at least not if the case went as expected. And in the middle of that storm, I found a strange kind of peace. Because I had faced it. Because I had spoken. And because, for the first time in my life, I chose to protect myself, even if it meant standing alone. The courtroom was almost empty when the verdict came down. No jury. No media. Just a judge, two attorneys, a court clerk, and Dylan standing next to his lawyer with his head slightly bowed. I wasn't there, I didn't want to be. I followed the proceedings through my attorney, who called me the moment the session ended. He pled guilty, she said simply. Took a deal. No jail time, but he'll have a record. 5 years probation, full restitution, mandatory financial counseling. I thanked her. Hung up. Then stood there in the middle of the kitchen, holding my phone like it was still delivering news. He pled guilty. It was over. Not the damage, not the fallout, but the waiting. The not knowing. The endless cycle of wondering if truth would finally weigh more than blood. Mark came home shortly after. I told him, and he nodded once, quiet. He poured us both a glass of wine, not to celebrate, but to acknowledge the end of a chapter neither of us had chosen. I went back to the station the next day to sign the final paperwork. The debt was officially cleared. Greenline had removed my name from the account and closed the investigation from their end. The police report would remain public, sealed only from employer access. The charges, now on Dylan's record, would follow him for life. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt still. Not empty. Not whole. Just still. I sat with that feeling for days. I didn't speak to my parents. They hadn't reached out since the sentencing. Maybe they didn't know what to say. Maybe they were angry. Maybe they were grieving the son they thought they had. I couldn't decide whether to call or wait. So I did nothing. I went back to work. I stood in front of my students and taught them how to manage stress, how to face conflict, how to heal. And in the quiet between sessions, I started researching financial fraud, how it happens, who it targets, what it costs. I read stories like mine. People scammed by strangers, lovers, exes. But rarely family. There were fewer guides for that kind of betrayal. No recovery timeline. No clean steps for rebuilding trust when it was your own blood who broke it. So I started writing. At first, just fragments. Sentences about what it felt like to realize your name was no longer safe. Paragraphs about the way silence protected the wrong people. Memories of Dylan, not just the lies, but the truth before them. I wrote until my hand cramped, then typed until the keyboard blurred. Mark noticed. He said nothing, just moved my laptop to the charger when I forgot. Then one night, he came home with a small flyer from the department, a community awareness event on identity theft and fraud prevention. A chance for victims to share their stories. He handed it to me like it was a gift. You don't have to speak. But you could. I thought about it for days. And then I signed up. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of 50 people in a community center room that smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. I read from the pages I'd written. I didn't name Dylan. I didn't dramatize it. I just told the truth. When I finished, people clapped. And afterward, they lined up to talk. A woman whose son had taken out loans in her name. A man whose brother had emptied their joint business account. A teacher who lost her savings to her own niece. Every one of them said the same thing in different ways. I thought I was the only one. And in that moment, something shifted again. The pain didn't shrink, but it stopped being mine alone. I had pulled it into the light. Later that night, Mark and I sat in silence on the balcony again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. You're stronger than most people I know, he said. I didn't answer right away. But I believed him. Because I had learned the hardest lesson: strength isn't loud. It isn't sharp. Sometimes, it's just refusing to vanish. Spring came late that year. The kind of slow, creeping arrival that doesn't announce itself all at once. The cold faded gradually, flowers took their time, and I found myself doing the same. There were no dramatic revelations, no tearful reunions. Just quiet, deliberate steps toward something that looked like peace. Months had passed since Dylan's sentencing. I hadn't spoken to him. He hadn't tried to reach out, and I hadn't gone looking for answers he had never truly offered. Some wounds don't bleed, they calcify. They become part of the structure. You don't pretend they're not there, you just learn to move with them. The debt was gone. My credit was fully restored. The bank formally apologized and sent a letter confirming that I had been the victim of identity fraud. That letter, though simple, felt like a banner. A piece of paper that made my name feel clean again. Mark and I moved forward slowly. We didn't rush the wedding plans. We both knew the foundation mattered more than the timeline. But something deeper had shifted between us. Every day, every quiet moment we shared felt grounded in something neither of us could fake: trust built through fire. Not the easy kind that forms in joy, but the kind that grows in hardship, in confrontation, in the decision to stay. One afternoon, as we sat on the couch flipping through potential wedding venues, Mark looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in a while. I think you should keep speaking, he said. What you're doing, it matters. So I did. I partnered with a local nonprofit focused on financial literacy and fraud prevention. I started speaking at workshops, mostly small rooms at first, libraries, schools, rec centers. The audiences were mixed: retirees, young professionals, college students. People who had been scammed. People who were afraid they might be next. People who simply didn't understand how fragile identity really was. I told them my story. Not just the facts, but the emotional truth. What it meant to realize someone you love sees your trust as a tool. How betrayal by family carries a silence most victims are too ashamed to name. And most importantly, how to come back from it. One day, after a talk, a teenage girl approached me. She couldn't have been more than 16. She said, "I think my older brother did something like that to my mom. She's too scared to report it." I gave her the name of a counselor. Then I gave her a quiet hug. Because I understood. The story had never really been about Dylan. It was about the part of me that had to decide who I was without the illusion of perfect family ties. It was about reclaiming power without revenge. About holding people accountable without becoming consumed by anger. And maybe, most of all, it was about knowing when to let go. I still see my parents, but the relationship is different now. Tentative. Careful. We don't talk about Dylan. Not because it's forbidden, but because we've all accepted that there's no going back to what we were. There is only forward, whatever that looks like. Mark and I eventually married. It was a small ceremony by a lake with just a few close friends and family. No drama. No spectacle. Just vows spoken with clarity and love. I walked down the aisle with steady steps. Not as a victim, but as someone who had faced the theft of her identity and taken it back.